Over 60? Discover 4 shocking fish you must avoid and 4 incredible fish that transform your health. Margaret sat on the dock, holding the fishing rod with a feeble grip, her heart a silent storm of anxiety. Lucas, her spirited grandson, bounded about as he eagerly cast his line into the shimmering waters of the Oregon coast. The crisp air carried the faintest hint of salt and freedom, yet Margaret felt trapped in her grief and the routine of solitude. Each passing wave whispered reminders of her late husband, the fishing trips they shared, the laughter that once filled her home now reduced to echoes in her mind. As she adjusted her grip, her thoughts drifted back to the small boat swaying gently nearby, laughter from its occupants floating across the water, bringing a sharp pang of nostalgia. "What's wrong, Grandma?" Lucas asked, his voice bright, oblivious to the shadows clouding her eyes. "Nothing, sweetie," she replied, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her heart. For a moment, she feared her weariness might crush the spirit she fought to revive, but the prospect of sharing time with Lucas spurred a flicker of hope. Diving into her old tackle box, Margaret searched for a lure that could bridge her past with the uncertain future ahead. Instead, her fingers brushed against something unexpected. A tattered family recipe book, buried deep, revealed itself. Intrigued, she opened it, revealing pages adorned with her mother's elegant handwriting, each recipe a testament to love. Memories surged, family gatherings filled with the rich aroma of clam chowder, her mother's laughter melding with the sounds of clinking dishes. But her heart sank as her eyes flicked through the recipes. With every dish that called for seafood, a new reality set in. Each fish conjured not just flavors, but risks. The lurking information she had recently stumbled upon about health problems tied to certain fish gnawed at her. High blood pressure, lingering fatigue, her body had begun to betray her. Unseen dangers threatened the cherished traditions of her family, and with that recognition came an avalanche of doubt. She hesitated between honoring her mother's legacy and protecting her health. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The thought of discussing these revelations made her stomach churn. Would the community listen? Or would they see her as a meddler, questioning the way of life they had long embraced? Margaret's heart raced as she envisioned the faces of her neighbors, many of whom had cradled fishing rods for decades, tough, grizzled, unwavering. What if she upset their traditions? The tension grew, pooling tightly in her chest. Yet, when she met Lucas's curious gaze, she felt the urge stir within her, pushing against the fear. Changing her family's traditions meant something important. It could transform lives. Her determination ignited, but as doubt shadowed closer, the daunting battle between health and tradition loomed large. Would they understand her struggle? Or would her vulnerability turn her into a pariah? Standing on the precipice of an uncertain path, the weight of the impending dinner lingered. Could she truly honor her mother's legacy while advocating for her health? And, more importantly, how could she carve a place for herself in a community that might well resist her, perhaps even reject her? The questions reverberated in her mind, with each tick of the clock amplifying her anxieties, solidifying the divide between who she was and who she aspired to be. Margaret inhaled deeply, drawing in the salt-laden air, or perhaps her resolve. There was a decision brewing within her, a tempest beneath her already stormy exterior. She looked at Lucas, his childish enthusiasm brilliantly illuminating the fog of her thoughts. How grateful she felt for him, this sparkling reminder of life's vibrant possibilities. For now, he was her anchor, grounding her as she began to envision a new approach to family traditions. But how could she communicate that to others? Packing up the recipe book, she set her fishing rods down and shared moments with Lucas, watching as he experimented with his new fishing technique. His excitement was infectious, filtering through her worries like golden sunlight. Yet as he reeled in a tiny, flopping fish, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. Why couldn't she just embrace this moment as it was simple and unburdened by the complexities of health? The sensation plagued her like a dark cloud as she replayed the internal dialogue that had plagued her for days. It boiled over into a decision she no longer wanted to be a passive observer in her own life. Advocacy could start small, perhaps with a simple dinner discussion, a recipe exchange with close friends, or an informal chat over coffee. Could historic family recipes be redefined, swapping out potentially harmful fish for healthier options while retaining just as much flavor? Later that evening, surrounded by the familiar decor of her home, the urge to honor her mother's legacy through a healthier lens blossomed. Margaret thumbed through the recipe book again, scribbling potential replacements next to traditional ingredients. Her mind buzzed with motivation, the possibilities unfolding like the waves that danced out on the horizon. She stirred the soup later that week. She even found a certain giddiness bubbling within her. Dealing with her grief was no longer a hindrance. It became fuel for transformation. She carried Lucas's laughter in her heart, instilling it into the very essence of her cooking as she tweaked her mother's recipes. A delightful thought danced at the edge of her awareness. Could she organize a tasting night? Vulnerability accompanied ambition, and as that idea took shape in her mind, fear twisted in her stomach once more. A community event meant confronting judgment. What if they disapproved of her adaptations? Would they dismiss her efforts as a betrayal of tradition? The icy fingers of self-doubt squeezed her heart as she found herself staring at the walls of her kitchen, wondering if she was still strong enough to face the storm brewing within the community. It was time for a brave step into the unknown, a daring leap into advocacy that challenged norms she had lived by for so long. Margaret began developing a plan for her tasting night. She remembered the looks on her neighbors' faces when they brought warmth to each gathering. Camaraderie, shared history, the powerful bond of culture. Surely, she mused, food was a language of its own. If she could just communicate her ideas passionately, perhaps they could embrace the changes she envisioned. That thought sparked a determination she hadn't felt in years. Margaret could do this. Little by little, she'd carve out a space for herself in a world that felt distant and alien. The moment of truth danced in her mind, exciting and terrifying all at once. As she finalized her list of dishes and potential guests, an unexpected knock interrupted her thoughts. The moment wound tightly in anticipation as she opened the door. Standing there, framed against the evening sky, were her neighbors, the fishing crew she had worried so much about but hadn't expected to see. What did they want? Had she made a grave mistake, or were they here to support her risk? With her heart pounding, her tongue felt dry as she faced the threshold of what could become a pivotal moment in her life. Margaret blinked in surprise, her heart racing as the familiar faces of her neighbors greeted her with cautious smiles. She felt as though the world had shifted beneath her feet, the uncertainties of her plans crashing over her like a wave. Their presence felt like an invitation, yet the weight of her new intentions bore down heavily on her shoulders. "Hey, Margaret." Eric, the eldest of the group, stepped forward first. "We brought some freshly caught fish and thought you might want to join us in preparing them. We're planning a little cookout this weekend." A pang of panic surged through her. The cookout represented everything she struggled with, the very tradition she was working to reshape. Would they accept her adaptations? She mulled over her response, anxiety tightening its grip around her throat. "Thanks, Eric," she began slowly, biting her lip. "But I've been thinking about changing our recipes a bit." The mere thought of sharing her plans caused her voice to falter. How would they react? Would they understand her desire to balance health with tradition, or would they see it as a sign of weakness, of somehow undermining their customs? Lucas, sensing his mother's hesitation, darted around her and excitedly engaged with their neighbors. "Did you catch anything big? Can we help cook? Mom is making some new recipes." His enthusiasm pulled her back from the brink of uncertainty, and Margaret watched as her neighbors exchanged glances. There was a flicker of intrigue in their eyes, but also something else, perhaps skepticism. Staying quiet about her goals felt like taking the easy route. The bond forged through community and tradition would be easily dismantled, yet holding on to old practices could jeopardize her mother's legacy. She recalled her mother teaching her to adapt, to grow. Hadn't cooking always been about experimentation and joy? What if I merged some of my ideas for the cookout? The words slipped out before she could second-guess herself. Like what? Eric asked, his curiosity piqued. Margaret straightened up, bolstered by determination. Maybe we could try grilling salmon with a citrus marinade instead of the typical fish fry. Healthier, and doesn't compromise on flavor. The atmosphere shifted, responses awaiting her to clarify her vision. She expected laughter or dismissals, but their intrigued silence begged for deeper exploration. Encouraged, she forged onward. And we could pair it with a fresh salad, swapping out heavier dressings for lighter options, maybe a vinaigrette made from local fruit? Margaret felt the thrill of possibility ripple through her as hesitant nods began to emerge from the group. "You're right, Margaret. I could get behind that," said Ella, one of the younger neighbors. "Tradition is great, but I think we could all use a bit of lightening up with our meals." Margaret's breath caught, a mixture of relief and excitement bubbling within her. Could this lead to an unexpected collaboration, where tradition could evolve rather than break? As the conversation flowed into ideas for the cookout, Margaret felt a sense of empowerment unfurling like a flag, a silent victory of sorts. Yet, with every shared suggestion and tentative agreement, a new and sharper sense of urgency loomed in the back of her mind. The door to her culinary vision was open, but how far was she willing to push those she cared about? Would they wholeheartedly embrace this new path forward, or draw a line in the sand once she proposed the tasting night more formally? With ideas blossoming, every upcoming interaction would test her resolve. She knew now that this was just the beginning of something larger than herself. As the neighbors talked excitedly about the cookout, a deeper conflation of fear and hope battled within her. The path ahead gleamed with potential. A true moment of transformation was on the horizon, one she couldn't dare to ignore. And yet, as their laughter echoed around her, the vital question remained. What price would she pay in the pursuit of uncharted waters? Margaret awoke the next morning with a newfound fervor pulsing through her veins. The sun streamed through the kitchen window, warming her cheeks with a gentle light, and for the first time in days, she felt nearly vibrant. Ideas swirled in her mind like a whirlwind. What could she create? What traditions could be altered without losing their essence? As she washed her hands and pulled out a cutting board, she replayed her previous evening's conversation in her mind. The neighbors had shown interest. Ella's words echoed, "A bit of lightening up with our meals." That small affirmation ignited a flicker of courage. Perhaps she could move beyond mere alterations and create a culinary experience that was transformational. But as she cut fresh herbs, she felt a creeping doubt curl around the edges of her mind. Was this really a departure from her mother's legacy, or a progression towards something healthier and more aligned with modern palates? Margaret busied herself with the cuts, each slice a measured decision toward emancipation from inertia. After a failed attempt at drafting the cookout's menu, she found herself staring into the refrigerator, a jumble of colors and textures speaking secrets. The bright greens of kale, the deep reds of ripe tomatoes, and the soft blush of fresh fish waited there, offering her inspiration. Why not create a dish that paid homage to heritage while providing revitalizing nutrients? A fusion, rather than a break. That afternoon, she reached out to Lucas and excitedly shared her ideas at the kitchen table. "What do you think about a grilled salmon and kale salad?" she proposed, watching his reaction closely. At 10, he was an expert in both skepticism and enthusiasm, and his eyes widened with curiosity. "Can we add those crunchy nuts?" "That would be awesome," Lucas declared, bouncing in his chair. Excitement surged through Margaret. Perhaps her ideas weren't just hers. Perhaps they could be woven with his youthful perspective, creating a recipe that represented them both. The two spent the day experimenting, the sounds of laughter and sizzling filling the air. At one point, Margaret paused, stirring a pot of quinoa, as a thought weighed on her. The cookout. The introduction of her new recipes would not just affect her. It rippled throughout her tight-knit community. Would they see her vision or resist it? What if they were offended by an evolution of their cherished traditions? That evening, exhaustion mingled with exhilaration as she plated the dishes. The vibrant colors and aromas coursing through her kitchen had morphed her anxiety into empowerment. But as she put the final touches on her salmon salad, a realization seeped through her anticipation. The fear was not about her spirit of experimentation or losing traditions. It was about receiving acceptance from her neighbors, those she cherished deeply. The clattering of dinnerware as Lucas set the table served as a reminder that this moment was not just about food. Each recipe diverging from a signature norm represented choices she was making for herself and for Lucas. They would be family meals celebrating health rather than regret. In that moment, as they sat down to eat, the gravity of her ambitions settled upon her. She was not merely acting upon her ideas, but reclaiming her agency. Maybe this isn't just about a cookout, she thought. It was about building her own path, rooted yet adaptable. The stakes felt higher, yet so did her determination. The following evening would bear witness to all her anxieties manifesting during the cookout. As she plotted her next steps, she realized she must confront not only her neighbors, but the deeply embedded frameworks of tradition itself. The real question was, could she handle the outcome, whatever it might be? And with that thought lingering in the air, she dared to wonder, what if they rejected her completely? As she stared out of the window at the setting sun, a new wave of uncertainty washed over her. Would she have the strength to navigate the aftermath of that pivotal moment? Margaret spent the entire day preparing for the cookout, separating her feelings of anticipation and dread like ingredients in a dish. Each task she undertook felt magnified, the simple act of chopping vegetables transforming into an emotional roller coaster. Would her neighbors appreciate her attempts to merge the past with the present? Would their acceptance bolster her confidence? Or would their skepticism crush her budding resolve? As she folded napkins with care and arranged the outdoor seating, each placement felt heavy with expectation. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across her yard as she worked. It occurred to her how much had changed in the last few days. In re-evaluating her culinary style, she had unwittingly undertaken a greater journey. This cookout was quickly morphing into a personal statement, and the stakes felt personal now. "Mom, can I help with something?" Lucas called from the patio, breaking her reverie. He had been a loyal presence the past few days, matching her enthusiasm with innocent curiosity, a source of comfort she didn't quite recognize she needed. "Of course. You can help me with the drinks," she replied, just as much to fill the silence as to engage him in the preparations. As they mixed lemonade in a large pitcher, she contemplated how her son was unwittingly a partner in this endeavor, grounding her focus and providing unwavering support. While pouring the liquid over ice, Margaret's thoughts meandered to her neighbors. She recalled the stories exchanged under flickering porch lights, the laughter spilling from backyard gatherings, each meal a testament to shared experiences and collective memories. Would she have the same camaraderie after this event? That night, as Margaret arranged the final details, she felt the building pressure of the upcoming evening settle deep within her chest. It was not just about the food. It was about redefining her identity, a silent confrontation with her past while reaching toward her future. The idea of her mom's recipes being altered whispered quietly, hovering over her resolve like an omnipresent chef questioning her technique. Her mind flickered back to Ella's comment about lightening up. What if the outcome was not simply a reflection of her cooking, but a scrutiny of her adventurous spirit? This was more than a potluck. This was a culinary assertion. Would they view her not just as the keeper of tradition, but as someone who dared to innovate? As she set her alarm for the following morning, uncertainty churned within her. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown to potential rejection, yet a hint of excitement lingered at the corners of her resolve. She was on the brink of something new, and she was determined to face whatever would unfold, one dish at a time. The next day, she awoke early, driven by an urgency that felt electric. She was not merely preparing dishes, she was preparing herself. As she prepped, chopping, mixing, and seasoning, her movements were fueled not just by physicality, but by a quiet mantra. This cookout marked her emergence from the shadows of her own doubts. Still, as she dressed for the event, a familiar ache of fear clawed at her insides. She gazed into the mirror, searching for affirmation. What would she say if people questioned her changes? What would she feel if they turned their backs on her creations? Confronting the reflection staring back at her, she finally breathed deeply. "This is your moment," she whispered to herself, a pledge sealed with sheer determination. Just then, a knock at the door interrupted the weight of her thoughts, causing her heart to race. She shot a glance at the clock. It was nearly time. The moment of truth had arrived quicker than she expected. Taking a breath, She opened the door and was met by the familiar faces of her neighbors, who were undoubtedly ready to judge her culinary transformations. The weight of their presence pressed against her, ready to determine the flavor of the evening. Would they savor her dishes or condemn her efforts? As she stepped aside, inviting them in, Margaret steeled herself for the confrontation that lay ahead, ready to embrace the evolution of her journey. As the guests filed into her backyard, Margaret felt the air shift around her. Each familiar face was a potential critic, ready to dissect not just her dishes but the choices that had led her to this moment. The laughter and chatter filled the space, but underneath it all, a tangible tension coursed through her veins. She breathed in the pungent aroma of her marinated chicken, a fusion of spices that both delighted and terrified her. Lucas darted around, eager to show off the lemonade he and his mother had prepared, his innocent enthusiasm serving as a shield against the encroaching doubt. Observing him, she was reminded of the innocence of childhood, that unrefined joy which sometimes slipped away from adults burdened by expectations. How could she foster that spirit in herself, cultivated as it was by the weight of perceived failures? As neighbors grabbed plates and began filling them with her creations, Margaret's heart raced. She made small talk, her voice steady, but internally she was racing through debriefing scenarios in her mind. Would they comment on whether her alterations felt authentic? Would they voice their opinions openly, or would they suffocate her with silence? The first bite of her smoked paprika corn salad was met with a mixed reaction. One of her neighbors, Judith, savored every bite while another, Frank, raised an eyebrow as he chewed. Margaret felt a wave of heat rush to her cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and determination urging her to explain her decisions, to justify her innovations. Just trying a new twist on tradition, she forced out, her attempt at lightheartedness ringing hollow. Their reactions were uncertain, but a few murmurs of approval stirred a flicker of hope within her. Each compliment ignited a spark, giving her the strength to press forward, to abandon the fiery need for validation and instead focus on the joy of expression through cooking. This realization felt seismic. Her culinary efforts were not merely about acceptance. They were her art, and were worthy of appreciation whether met with approval or criticism. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over the group. Encouraged by the warmth of the environment, Margaret decided to introduce her signature dish, her mother's old-fashioned potato salad conjured up in a way that coupled nostalgia with modern flair. This one is a family classic, but I added a zing with a dash of jalapeno, she explained, watching their expressions closely. Frank sampled it, his face betraying nothing, while Judith's eyes lit up in surprise. "Oh, this is good. I never would have thought of adding heat to potato salad," she exclaimed, and that spark of enthusiasm ignited something deeper within Margaret. Perhaps this wasn't just about making a mark on her neighbors' food experiences. It was about staking her claim in her own narrative. As the evening progressed, her confidence began to swell like the steam rising from the grill. Her initial fear of failure tangled with an exciting sense of growth. Each conversation became a stepping stone. With every compliment, a flicker of self-acceptance started to illuminate the darker corners of her mind. She was more than just a custodian of old recipes, she was a creator. And then came the moment she had dreaded. Someone directly challenged her choices. "This isn't how my mom made it," scoffed Marjorie, arms crossed defiantly as she set the plate down. Margaret felt the world tilt. It took everything she had to meet the sharpness of Marjorie's gaze, her pulse quickening. In that moment, a question loomed large. Would she defend her journey of transformation or sink back into the shadows of her past? Breathlessly, the answer unfurled within her. She realized it was not about convincing Marjorie, but rather embracing her own culinary vision and passion. The atmosphere crackled with potential, and as she prepared to respond, the stakes had never felt higher. How would she assert her independence in the face of skepticism? Would she finally let the authenticity of her voice emerge from the depths of doubt? "Let me explain what this recipe means to me," she began, prepared to articulate more than just flavors. The journey into her own truth had only just begun, and the rest of the evening held the promise of radical self-discovery. Margaret's voice pierced through the low hum of chatter, each word a deliberate step onto the arena of her own making. As the sun dipped below the horizon, The streaks of orange and purple painted a backdrop to her unfolding revelation. She was aware of the gravity in the air. Everyone around them momentarily hushed, drawn in by her vulnerability. This potato salad, she gestured toward the dish on the table, is more than just a recipe. It embodies my mother's spirit, her creativity woven into the fabric of our family meals. The jalapeno isn't just an addition. It's a reflection of how I can blend cherished memories with new experiences. Judging by the faces around her, Margaret accepted that some were still skeptical while others leaned in, intrigued. There was a raw honesty in her voice. With every syllable, she peeled back layers of uncertainty that had smothered her confidence for years. It felt liberating to merge her past with her present, to assert that culinary innovation could honor tradition rather than simply replace it. Marjorie's expression shifted slightly, the skepticism giving way to intrigue, if only for a moment. "So you're saying it's about evolution?" she asked, her arms still crossed, but a hint of curiosity now edged into her posture. "Exactly," Margaret replied, feeling a rush of strength. "Food is meant to be a living art, don't you think? It grows with us, evolves through our experiences." She felt a shift in the energy around her, as if she were guiding the entire conversation rather than just responding to it. This moment marked a turn in her narrative, no longer a passive participant in her culinary journey, but an active architect. The applause of polite approval began to echo in her heart. It wasn't perfect, there would always be contrasting opinions, but for the first time, she realized she could own her evolution. Margaret turned her focus back to Marjorie, whose gaze now hovered in contemplation. "What if you tried adding something unexpected to your own family recipes?" She nudged, allowing a smile to brighten her intensity. "Maybe there's room for you to surprise your guests too." The silence stretched, a silent challenge hanging in the air. Would Marjorie feel compelled to explore that possibility? Margaret was intrigued by the thought that she had not only voiced her truth, but opened a door for dialogue around it, an invitation for others to also seek growth within their comfort zones. As evening rolled in, slowly dimming the backyard light, conversations began to take a more liberating tone. With each story shared, laughter rippled through the group, and Margaret found herself enveloped by an unexpected camaraderie. She listened carefully, absorbing anecdotes that intertwined food with memories and sentiments. For her personally, each story was a reminder that everyone carried their unique tales, blending seamlessly into the broader narrative of life. Margaret returned to her own dishes, replenishing the empty platters with fresh batches. Each serving became a testament to her courage, the courage to create and innovate amidst scrutiny. She felt a bubbling excitement blossom within. This was not merely a party, it was an awakening. As guests wrapped up their evening, a lingering question remained suspended in the air for her. What other roles could she play in this world of culinary exploration? Was she ready to step into a role beyond just the home cook, but perhaps even to teach and inspire? She glanced around, her heart racing as she entertained the idea of hosting workshops, sharing her experiences to empower others to embrace their own culinary transformations. The flicker of ambition sparked into flame, a prospect she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge until now. But that flame came with its own shadows. Would she be able to commit to this new path, facing the fears of failure that had plagued her for so long? With a mix of determination and doubt swirling within her, she realized the journey was just beginning, each choice unfolding into a richer narrative. In that moment, the idea crystallized. "I need to research what it takes to make that transition," she mused quietly, planting the seeds of what could blossom in her life. The clock had struck a new hour of opportunity, and she was poised on the brink of discovery. As her guests departed, Margaret clutched her notepad tightly, ready to scribble the swirling ideas racing through her mind. It was time to face the reality of her fears and dreams. Could she find the courage she needed to move forward? The anticipation hung heavy in the air, leaving her with an electrifying question that loomed. Would she grasp this pivotal moment and truly take the plunge into the unknown? The next morning, the sun streamed through Margaret's kitchen window, illuminating the scattered notes and recipe cards sprawled across the table. She could still feel the hum of the previous night, the thrill of sharing her story. It ignited a spark within her, but now there was research to do. She sipped her coffee, savoring the warmth as clarity washed over her. What did she need to transition from a home cook to a culinary educator? Her fingers danced over her notepad, jotting down ideas, workshop formats, targeted audiences, even potential recipes to teach. Each idea expanded her world, but it also connected back to an ever-present sense of fear. What if no one showed up? What if she wasn't enough? Shaking off the doubt, she threw herself into research. As the hours rolled on, Margaret dove into literature on culinary teaching methods and effective communication strategies. She scribbled notes on everything from classroom management to engaging presentations. For the first time, she was piecing together a foundation for a dream. As she worked, she hit an unexpected wall. The thought flickered like a dim light. What do I really know? Am I authentic enough to teach others? A knot tightened in her stomach. She had harnessed her personal experiences, but what made her an expert? With her hands trembling slightly, she closed her eyes to conduct a mental inventory. Memories flowed, moments of trial and error in her kitchen, the joy of recreating her mother's recipes, the rush of innovation when adapting flavors. Each failure had paved the way for growth. With newfound determination, she felt an internal shift. Margaret took a deep breath, pulled out a new sheet of paper, and at the top, she wrote, "My culinary journey." She listed the experiences that had shaped her. Every triumph and misstep was relevant. They were her credentials. As she detailed her journey, she found herself reconsidering her past hesitations regarding the jalapeno potato salad. It was personal. It was her mother's legacy and her unique twist for the modern kitchen. Her perspective shifted again. Could I make that my first class? She mused, excitement bubbling anew. She would demonstrate how to blend memories with innovation, teaching others to identify their culinary stories. Margaret's heart raced as she thought about designing that initial workshop and the thrill of seeing students' eyes light up as they transformed their family recipes. The class could be interactive. Whose stories could they share? What treasures of culinary heritage could emerge from each participant? But the shadows of doubt flickered back to life. What if she froze in front of the group? What if her presentation fell flat? Would her voice shake? She wrestled with these thoughts, feeling the familiar grip of fear tightening around her. One crucial moment emerged in her mind. You can't change what you're afraid of, but you can change how you face it. Her own words echoed back from the gathering she had so courageously navigated. Perhaps her authenticity lay not in being flawless, but in being real amidst the nerves and vulnerability. With renewed energy, Margaret rose to register for a local community college workshop about teaching culinary classes. She could learn from professionals who had walked the path she was eager to tread. It was a small but vital step toward her dream. She typed the information into her browser, heart racing at the prospect of connecting with professionals, absorbing their wisdom and insights. That afternoon, she sat through the workshop, listening to seasoned instructors share their experiences. Each success story ignited a fire within her, further solidifying her aspirations. The walls around her questioning banished a little more, replaced by a sense of possibility and belonging. Voices echoed in her mind, reminding her of her unique narrative and the lives she could touch. As she drove home, the path ahead began to glimmer. What would it truly be like to stand in front of a room full of eager learners, excited for new knowledge? Could she witness their transformations, the way she had transformed? Yet, lingering in the back of her mind, a simmering question remained: how could she ensure that her own journey didn't falter as she began empowering others? Margaret parked her car, heart pounding, still grounded in the fear, but more rooted in determination than ever before. She climbed the stairs to her kitchen, ready to map out the next steps. A new idea sparked within. What if she blended her stories with methodology to create profound workshops? But just as happily as inspiration struck, a shadow of uncertainty crept back. What if her blend of mentorship and personal storytelling fell flat? Her determination wavered under this new pressure. It was time to confront her fears head-on, to bolster her commitment to both her journey and those who would embark on culinary transformations alongside her. Would she find the strength to marry her ambitions with the authenticity she craved and be that beacon for others? With that question echoing in her mind, Margaret opened her notepad to chart a course for her journey was just beginning. And so was the exploration of who she might truly be as an educator. Margaret sat at her kitchen table, The pile of notes and recipe cards now transformed into a vibrant roadmap to her burgeoning culinary vision. The sun dipped low, casting a warm glow that danced off the edges of her notepad. Yet, the shadows of self-doubt loomed larger than ever, whispering fears that made her second-guess everything she had worked toward. What if she wasn't good enough? What if no one saw value in her unique approach? Leaning back in her chair, she exhaled deeply, allowing the tension to seep out of her. Her fingers hovered over her pen, contemplating a new direction in her planning. This was no longer just about recipes or teaching methods. This was about crafting a narrative. Determined, she began to outline her first workshop, putting jalapeno potato salad at the top. A simple recipe, yet it held the weight of her family's legacy, the collective warmth of shared meals, and the spark of innovation that had shaped her growth. It was not just a recipe. It would be a source of exploration where students could confront their culinary histories while stepping into the new. Images flooded her mind of participants standing in her kitchen, tasting, experimenting, sharing laughter intertwined with stories. She imagined the transformative energy of the space, an echo of voices discussing their heritage and the foods that shaped them. The prospect filled her with a mix of fear and exhilaration, but her thoughts turned darker. What if she stumbled in front of them? Would they judge her? Would she extract their stories properly? It spiraled into uncertainty, and Margaret felt an urge to procrastinate. Clenching her fists, she fought against her instinct to withdraw. Acknowledging her fears didn't mean acquiescing to them. Rallying her thoughts, she recalled the workshop she had attended, the stories of seasoned educators who had once stood in her shoes, feeling the same knots of anxiety. They had transformed fear into fuel. What had they learned, and how could that apply to her? She sat up straight and began penning a list of what she could incorporate into her workshop. Engaging icebreakers to foster a quick connection, hands-on activities to ground the learning in realistic experience, and an emphasis on storytelling as a means of culinary education. She even noted examples of success stories she could share from her own journey, embodying vulnerability that could resonate with participants. The act of writing became cathartic. This was the very essence of who she was, someone who blended the past with the present, flavor with memory. She stripped her ideal workshop down to its core. This wouldn't just be an educational session. It would be a shared journey, a connection through food. With new vigor, she stood up and walked to her kitchen. The familiar sight of her well-worn cooking utensils and spice cabinets reinvigorated her spirit. This place had been a sanctuary of food and memories, and now it would host her aspirations. Flipping further through her notepad, she froze at a note requiring reflection. Confront your fear of inadequacy. Embrace your process. Perhaps her insecurities still lingered because she had not fully embraced her own culinary depth. It wasn't enough to teach. She needed to embody the very transformation she wished to facilitate. Margaret decided it was time to invite a few friends over for an informal test run of her class, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This would be an opportunity not only to practice speaking and teaching, but also to gather feedback on her format and approach. She could share her vision, ask for honest opinions, and refine her methods without the added weight of formal expectations. In that moment of clarity, she realized she was building not just workshops, but a community, a space where cooking could breathe life into stories, friendships, and personal growth. The idea of facilitating such transformative experiences energized her, illuminating the path ahead. As her heart raced with anticipation, she crafted a text to her closest friends. Informal yet inviting. Would they join her for a humble culinary adventure that could pave the way for something greater? Yet another question dampened her excitement. What would she do if they critiqued her methods harshly? This pending vulnerability loomed like an impending storm. It was time to not just face her fears, but to embrace them. Could she let go of her need for perfection and embrace authenticity in her teaching heart? With the text sent and the anxiety bubbling up again, Margaret's hands trembled slightly. She would have to confront her fears. Her journey was only just beginning, and a pivotal moment for her transformation loomed dangerously close. The workshop and perhaps a new version of herself waited just beyond the horizon. Would she summon the courage to step into her own light? The morning of the tasting event dawned clear and bright, but Margaret felt a tempest within. She stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the bubbling pots and aromatic herbs, her mind racing with the possibilities that lay ahead. Today wasn't just an ordinary gathering. It was the culmination of every tentative step she had taken towards transformation. As she prepared the last of her dishes, Margaret reflected on how far she had come. What once felt like a burden-altering family recipes for a healthier future was now infused with purpose. She was now ready to share her journey, her innovations, and her mother-esque spirit, interwoven into every flavor and texture. Every chop of the knife felt more than just a culinary task, but a declaration of her newfound identity. She was becoming an advocate for both her mother-esque legacy and her own health. It was time to show her neighbors that change could coexist with tradition without losing the essence of their shared history. When Lucas arrived home from school, he burst through the door, excitement sparkling in his eyes. "Is it time for the tasting, Mom? Are the neighbors coming?" His enthusiasm ignited her own, giving her the boost she needed to push past her anxiety. As guests began to arrive, the air filled with friendly chatter and laughter. But beneath it all, Margaret felt the familiar thrum of doubt rising. The moment was here, easily the most significant of her life. She was about to share her culinary perspective with the very people she feared would reject it. "Hello, everyone," Margaret greeted, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "I'm so glad you could join us." She watched as faces she recognized from the fishing docks glanced over her carefully laid out dishes, their expressions painting a tapestry of curiosity and skepticism. Today, she would not sink into self-doubt. She would rise. Her heart pounding, she began to present her dishes one by one. As she served the jalapeno potato salad, she carefully explained how it had transformed from a mere food legacy to a fusion of flavors that honored both her mother-esque roots and her dedication to health. "This salad is a homecoming of sorts," she emphasized. "It's honoring my mother's love for cooking while breathing new life into how we approach our meals today." An edge of vulnerability in her voice struck a chord, drawing the attention of her guests. As they took their first bites, she felt a wave of exhilaration and fear wash over her. What would their reactions be? Margaret watched as the guests savored the flavors, and to her relief, nods of approval began to ripple. "Delicious," one neighbor exclaimed, adding weight to her rising confidence. Another chimed in, "I can't believe the spice works so well with the classic flavor." Little by little, her fears began to dissolve, replaced by warm acceptance as her culinary vision unfurled before them. Next, she presented her grilled salmon with a refreshing citrus marinade. She shared the importance of embracing healthy alternatives while celebrating community recipes. The genuine curiosity in their faces emboldened her. "Cooking is about evolution, not sacrifice," she asserted. "It's about growing, adapting, and sharing those discoveries with each other." As the tasting progressed, Margaret found her footing. Each praise lit her from within, grounding the sense of belonging she craved. A conversation started, and participants began to share their version of family recipes, visions for upsizing tradition, and their personal culinary experiences. She was no longer alone in her journey. She was connected to a tapestry of shared histories, supporting each other in a balanced path forward. By the end of the evening, laughter filled the room, disrupting the veil of doubt that had long hovered over Margaret's shoulders. She watched her neighbors engage with excitement, trying to grasp some of her healthier changes. They weren't just receiving, they were contributing, creating, and evolving together. In that moment, the walls built by tradition began to soften, revealing a space ripe for exploration. As the last guests filtered out, Margaret stood amidst the remnants of her gathering, the weight of doubt now replaced by a solid sense of pride. In understanding herself as both nurturer and innovator, she had successfully transformed not only a meal, but also her place within the community. She had bridged the past and the present, cultivating a dynamic future where recipes grew as they were shared. Filled with an anchored sense of purpose, she lingered over the kitchen counter, gathering remnants of a beautiful evening, her heart brimming with accomplishment. She had faced her fears, embraced the unknown, and ultimately forged a new identity not just as a cook, but as a connector, a leader in the culinary narratives of her community. The taste of success hung in the air like the scent of her mother's old recipes, promising more moments of innovation and adventure, a journey still blossoming. Margaret grasped at her notepad, filled with ideas for future workshops. Today had just been the beginning. Her ambition loomed ever larger. This newfound confidence propelled her forward, the thought dancing vividly in her mind. Could she really facilitate transformative experiences for others, just as she had for herself? Without hesitation, Margaret embraced the possibility with open arms, ready to write the next chapter of her culinary legacy. It was time to teach, inspire, and embrace the ongoing transformation of herself and her community through the powerful language of food. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.